Join Simti for a change.
Hello and welcome everybody to this very special Simti webcast. The topic, Generative AI in Media, who will win and who will lose? I am your host, Joel Welch, and thank you for being with us once again. I know there are a lot of webcasts that you can watch and videos, video platforms and such, so we do appreciate you being with us for today. I do have a little bit of housekeeping to do before I introduce your speaker and hand the floor over to him. So let's get right to that housekeeping. As you can see on the screen, we do have a sponsor, as we generally do for these. You gotta thank AJA. It's been, I bet it's a decade that they have sponsored Simti webcasts. And so if you see these folks, people who work for AJA Video Systems in your travels, you see them, thank them for their support of industry education and Simti education in particular. I do want to mention that Simti offers private courses. We do have a program of virtual courses, a whole list of them. But if you would like to bring Simti in and have them present those courses to your company, please get in touch with education@simti.org, and they'll be happy to talk about the details, the specifics, and fix you right up. Speaking of learning, they do want Simti is trying to assess what is the most important learning need for the industry, the various industry segments. And so you can either scan that QR code right there, and it'll bring you to I think it's 3-question survey. And very simple, very easy. Give Simti your thoughts, and because they want to help folks learn what the industry needs, and you are the only people that can tell Simti what it is that you need to learn. So please go ahead and fill out that survey. Also, the Simti's Future of Cinema conference held at the NAB show was recorded, and the on-demand videos now are available. Again, there's a QR code there. It will be in a PDF of the slides that you'll receive in exchange for your feedback shortly after the webcast. And also, as you probably saw, this webcast is also being recorded, and the on-demand video will be available within a few days. But for the Future Cinema Conference, that QR code will bring you right to them. And the 2023 Media Technology Summit call for technical papers is open. Another QR code. Submit your proposal for a manuscript today, or when you get the PDF if you can't get that QR code. The summit is being held the 16th and the 19th of October, 2023 at the Lowe's Hollywood Hotel in Hollywood. That was the favored venue over the past several years, and we're back again. This webcast is presented for informational purposes only. Views and opinions expressed are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of Simti or Simti members. Reference to any specific company, product, or service does not represent a promotion, endorsement, or recommendation by Simti. And now it's my pleasure to bring on screen your speaker, Mr. Yves Bergquist. He's a good friend of Simti and has presented many times before, but this particular topic I think is on everybody's minds these days. Welcome, Yves. I'm going to bring you right over to your content, and if you would, please take it away.
Thank you, Joe. It's always such a great pleasure to be with you and Simti and all the folks on. Thank you for joining. So as probably a bunch of you know, I work at the Entertainment Technology Center where I manage the AI and blockchain in media project. For those of you who don't know ETC, we're an industry group, the think tank and research center at the School of Cinematic Arts. We're supported by all the Hollywood studios and a lot of technology companies. And what we do is we do a lot of education and speaking. We help our members look around corners to and understand the impact of new technologies on the industry. And we also organize events. And I'm proud to announce a big event that's coming up June 8th, the Synthetic Media Summit, in collaboration with SIMTI. So the School of Cinematic Arts and the Annenberg School of Communication are coming together for the first time to address synthetic media and artificial intelligence in the media industry with just a stellar lineup of people. Renard Jenkins, Tony Guarino, Bill Baglar from Sony, but also a lot of technology leaders, Nikola Todorovic from Wonder Dynamics, we have Gary Marcus, we have Tom Graham of Metaphysic, and just a bunch of really incredible speakers. It's one day, June 8th, 2023. We have tickets for the physical component, and we only have 100 tickets. It's a small crowd available, and we have obviously unlimited tickets so you can join online. So there's two prices. Hopefully, we'd love to see a lot of you on there, physically, preferably, or online. This is going to go through. You're going to go out through SIMTI's marketing channels, so be on the lookout for it. Or you can get in touch with me, and I can send you the link to sign up for a ticket. This is going to be a really historical event. Okay, so I thought it would be sort of useful to do a bit of a recap on intelligence as a whole. I think we're just bombarded by hype on artificial intelligence and machine learning. A lot of people are using these terms interchangeably. It's not correct. So I thought, and a lot of the conversation about generative AI has to do with the inherent capabilities and limitations of machine learning versus all of intelligence. So I thought I'd spend a few minutes kind of doing a recap on, hey, what's intelligence? And what is the difference between human intelligence and machine intelligence? So you can, to really oversimplify, you can boil down intelligence to four processes, 4 layers. The first layer is what I call the environment layer, the perception layer. Basically, it is how we perceive, how humans and machines perceive the outside world. All the sensory data, humans have innate, what we call innateness, which is sort of innate models that are pre-installed in our brains, right? And they have to do with genetics and evolution. We also have world models, which machines don't have. Humans are also very, very good at processing messy and incomplete data. The world is full of messy and incomplete data. Humans are very, very good at acting and learning in that environment. Machines are terrible. As any of you knows that's done machine learning, the data ingestion process is very labor intensive. You have to clean up the data, you have to label the data, et cetera, et cetera. So the environment layer, in the environment layer, humans are a lot more able to deal with incomplete data, where machines are very literal. They're dumb on a massive scale. The second layer is, to me, the most important and where real intelligence emerges. It's called the understanding layer. I call it the understanding layer. Basically, this is where that low-level sensory data about the environment gets represented into knowledge, right? And the way to do that is it just gets connected. The data gets connected to prior data and gets abstracted into sort of more symbolic representations that the human mind or the machine mind can reason about to make decisions. And that representation also interacts with the world model that we have as humans. It basically, new data that comes in influences our world model. And that ability to take low-level data and do two things with it. Two things are representing context, right? So putting that data in the larger context of the world. The second thing is abstraction. And abstraction means we're taking low-level data and we are turning it into higher level object and symbols that we can reason about, right? So sort of we're compressing it into semantic objects that include a lot of bits and pieces of data that are a higher level that we can sort of manipulate and make part of a world model. This is something the machines do terribly. And this is really one of the main differences between machine intelligence and human intelligence. Human intelligence can do this on a massive scale very quickly, very easily. Machines need literally hand-drawn maps of the world, and they're called knowledge graphs. And knowledge graphs are basically um, uh, you know, maps that essentially tell the machine this is part of that, and that is part of that, and that is part of that, right? So we have to essentially map out the world for them. This is really important for what's coming, right? So part of the reason why GPT-4, for example, is so much more powerful than GPT-3 and 3.5 is really the integration with knowledge graphs. And the more we create machine models that are integrated into the kind of knowledge that exists in the world, the kind of knowledge that humans manipulate, the more intelligent they are. So the third layer is the learning layer, right? So this is where a lot of learning models and statistical models happen. This is something that machines do incredibly well, much better than humans actually, because they can learn on much more data than we can. And then the last layer is the abstraction and reasoning layer, right? So it's basically once we have all these symbols, we can kind of reason about them and evolve them inside of our model. And this is something that obviously machines do very poorly, right? So the only layer in these four layers that machines do better than humans is the learning layer. And this is what's called machine learning, right? And so machine learning, as you can see, is one of the four broad pieces of artificial intelligence. And this is really important because it informs how we can evaluate models like ChatGPT or diffusion models. So there's an enormous amount of confusion about AI. Why? The tech is accelerating really, really fast. It's becoming a lot more complex and hybrid between different methodologies layered together. It's harder to build, harder to understand. At the same time, it's still very experimental. It's still very expensive. It's still tentative. It is by no means an exact science, as we know. The data out there's a lot of it, but it's extremely fragmented. It's extremely messy and no unifying ontologies. There's a shortage of talent. It takes between 3 to 6 years to educate and train AI talent. Obviously, there's a lot of competition for scarce talent. And in the media industry, we have an acute problem is most players in the media industry don't have a software culture. Now, obviously, that's not the case about VFX companies, right? But most media companies don't have a software culture, and you really need a very, very strong software culture, deep pockets to be able to do interesting things with AI. And obviously, the industry is going through a lot of reorganization right now. The other challenge, and that's true for every single industry, not just the media industry. It's particularly acute in the media industry, but it is true everywhere, is what we call data literacy. So this is a slide coming from a survey of 1,000 chief data officers and chief analytics officers from Fortune 1000 corporations. And what this shows is that data literacy, only 2% of CDOs and CAOs list data literacy as a top priority, where it is literally the most important part of data analytics, machine learning, and AI, right? This is that human-machine connection, that human-machine interface, the ability for machines to output something that is legible and readable and useful has value in the world of humans, and the ability for humans to think about the output of machines intelligently, right? So that data literacy really is where 99% of AI projects fail. The ability for people to really understand how to break down business problems into chunks of machine learning models and data models and stuff like that. And we'll go back to it. This is something that is going to be recurrent in this presentation, but I just wanted to mention this. Like, most organizations fail because they are not putting their attention towards the main thing, which is evolving their own culture, their own ability to understand and approach artificial intelligence. And actually, this is a kind of a good plug-in for something that we're developing with SIMT. So ETC and SIMT are coming together to develop two courses. One on artificial intelligence for media executives, and one on artificial intelligence for media creatives. And the idea is, hey, we want to give a sort of short, hopefully decent injection of knowledge to people who have to think about AI and talk about AI in media. It's going to come out in Q3 or Q4 this year. So there's a lot going on in the AI field right now. As we're about to see, machine learning methods are becoming a lot more sophisticated, right? So a lot of money has been spent in the machine learning domain. There's been an enormous amount of experimentation, talent, and data coming into the field. And generally, when that happens, a lot of technology really advances really fast. And so, as we'll see, machine learning methods have become a lot more sophisticated, where you have sort of models within models within models. And there's been a lot of experimentation, a lot of money spent. And so as a result, we've come up with some very, very good stuff, right? Things like diffusion models or transformers or large language models are just extraordinarily complex, very sophisticated. At the same time, as this capability ramps up, those enormously complex and expensive models are still very limited, and we'll talk about why. There's a lot of ethical questions. There's a lot of legal questions. There's a lot of confusion about what's next, and we'll try to answer some of these questions. But this enhanced capability comes with a lot of power, a lot of hype, and also a lot of questions. And so we'll answer these questions. The third thing is, we're seeing the emergence of a sort of philosophy of artificial intelligence that is extremely promising, and probably a lot of organizations like Google, Microsoft, OpenAI are going to double down on. And this really the birth of hybrid methods. So if you remember, we talked about knowledge representation and knowledge graphs a couple of slides ago, and we talked about machine learning, right? So the philosophy that's emerging is called neural symbolic AI. And neural symbolic AI basically looks at machine learning and looks at its strength and weaknesses, and is trying to integrate machine learning with more semantic knowledge representation containers, right? So it's basically machine learning plus knowledge graphs. And if you look at how relevant ChatGPT or GPT-4 can sound, it really is because it is increasingly integrated with knowledge graphs. So that hybrid model philosophy, that multi-model hybrid model philosophy, is extremely powerful. It's something that's been advocated for decades by a lot of experts, and is really now coming into play and showing a lot of really incredible results. At the same time, and we'll talk about it, it's also very promising to help control artificial intelligence, because if we're giving AI agents a map of the world, well, we can very well give them some notions of ethics and boundaries about what to do and what not to do in that world. So it's also really, really good. It's not just a good way of creating really powerful AI applications. It's also a really, really good way of creating safe AI applications. The areas where the field of AI is still lacking is, it's still very that those AI models, are still, in a limited domain, right? They don't apply across the domain of human knowledge, right? They're very, very good at certain things where they're highly trained, and they're very, very poor at other things where they're not really that trained. So they're really dependent on the training set and not yet capable of generalizing different use and different types of, right? So again, really certain things and really bad at other things. The second area is they don't actually really understand, right? So models like stable diffusion models or large language models are still curve fitting models, right? They're gigantic statistical predictors. They are not capable of understanding. ChatGPT can write a poem about an apple, not understand an apple is in the real world, right? And this is kind of where knowledge graphs is trying to plug that gap. And the third thing is just still deep learning, right? It's still the same basic methodology pushed to the extreme, right? And there's a lot of questions right now about, are we about to hit a wall in the capabilities that we are creating based on deep learning? Because things like ChatGPT, things like stable diffusion, all of the diffusion models are just deep learning pushed to the extreme with an extreme amount of data, an extreme amount of computation, right? But it's still deep learning, and so it's going to be really interesting to see where the field evolves and what kind of methodologies are invented that can not replace deep learning, because deep learning has a place, but really add to deep learning. And we're not really sure what that looks like right now. Okay, so the um, um, we're looking at so the capabilities, as I mentioned, the capabilities of ChatGPT are a little bit all over the place, right? It's really, really good at certain things, good at other things. Basically, what ChatGPT does, it outputs really, really good, coherent, cogent, average text. So it's not capable of creating a script, right? It can create a poem, it can create a song in the style of certain things because it's been really highly trained in those styles. But basically, it's very, very good at handling mundane communication, right? And we do a lot of that. So, for example, it's apparently doing a lot of creating a lot of value for doctors who do just a lot of medical paperwork, and they have a lot of their work is spent writing these very sort of mundane letters and reports and things like that. So in that case, it's doing really well. We've been talking at ETC with a lot of writers and visual artists about their use of ChatGPT and stable diffusion and diffusion models and visual models, and a lot of really, really interesting stuff has come up, right? So I pasted a thread from Franklin Leonard that asked on Twitter a few weeks ago how how writers are using generative AI, and we're seeing a lot of writers using ChatGPT, for example, as a creative assistant. Basically to bounce ideas, come up with synonyms, sometimes write scenes and pieces of dialogue. The thing that is really important to understand is, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but ChatGPT is just basically just a super fancy autocomplete, right? It is not able to write truly symbolic semantic story, right? It is going to tell you what the next best word is after a specific word, right? And it can hold a lot of text in memory, so it can actually really reason almost at a sort of a paragraph level versus a word level, which the past models were doing. And so it's very limited in its ability to really articulate like character arcs or plots or things like that, things that are very highly symbolic, and ChatGPT is going to have a lot of trouble with, but it's helping a lot of writers bounce ideas, brainstorm ideas and things like that. And we'll look at sort of the use case has been in for for visual models. So I wanted to kind of throw this in the mix a little bit and sort of zoom out, because what we're seeing right now with generative AI is basically the latest chapter in a 30-year journey making everything more computable and more democratized. So the internet made knowledge computable. Social media made it computable, right? For better and for worse. Blockchain is making contracts and money computable, and now generative AI is making content computable. And so where this is going is this is really putting all these computational tools being put in the hand of everybody, and it's giving every individual in society a lot more power to do things that previously, 40 or 50 years ago, were the monopoly of gigantic organizations, right? It used to be that knowledge was the monopoly of enormous organizations because it was very, very expensive to aggregate. Relationships also were happening, within very institutional models, church or the corporation and the clubs. And money obviously used to be the monopoly of large organizations and nation states, and content used to be the monopoly of large media organizations. So what we're doing is what we're seeing is all of these computational tools, and the fact that now everything gets computable. And so we're creating the tools for individuals to be empowered and impact society on a massive scale at an individual level. So it's great for democracy, like we're all getting empowered individually. It's also highly disruptive, right? So I just wanted to mention that, because this sort of what everything, that's the background of everything that we're talking about. So what is ChatGPT? So to simplify, in the ChatGPT is what's called a transformer, and the transformer is a class of neural network that essentially takes text and abstracts the text in mathematical vectors, right? So it will represent the sequences of words and the grammar of them in mathematical vectors, right? And it's called the encoder. And then training on a lot of text data will be able to essentially predict what the best next word is, sequence of words in the decoder. So the encoder will take the low-level text and encode it into mathematical vectors. The decoder will take the mathematical vectors and decode them into, that's where the generation happens. And I'm really simplifying to the extreme here. This is kind of how the traditional generative models work. Transformers have added benefits where they the attention mechanisms, what's called the attention mechanisms, is a lot more powerful, meaning that transformers can understand the semantic relationships between words and sentences far up and down, much farther up and down the text, and hold a lot more text in memory, future text, than previous models. And this is really important because obviously when you're writing a recipe, right, you need to know that the recipe involves pasta or tomatoes and things like that. And so the ability of transformers to hold all of that context in their sequence learning capabilities is what makes them really powerful, right? So the attention mechanism is a really, really powerful thing. It also is very mimicking how the human brain works, because we can hold a lot of semantic context into memory, and the attention mechanism in transformers does that very, very well, which is a big part of why GPT sounds so amazing. The added piece to ChatGPT is what's called reinforcement learning using human feedback, and it's basically what's happened is they've built a model, and they hired hundreds of people, apparently in Kenya, to essentially prompt their model and then score the output for is this relevant to the prompt? Is this toxic, et cetera, et cetera? And so that human in the loop training is really also a big piece of why ChatGPT is so powerful. And I think one of the reasons why we're seeing the emergence of such powerful models now is that I feel a lot of companies like Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, DeepMind used to be very reluctant to involve in the machine learning process because it was cheating, right? Not sort of pure from a computational standpoint. But they've really come around to realizing that there's an enormous benefit to having this sort of human in the loop when you're training models like that. So, big part of why these models are powerful is they're extremely sophisticated, right? So there's ChatGPT, and the model behind ChatGPT has 5 or 6 or 7 different models working in combination, which is actually how the human brain works. Where before, like 5, 10 years ago, we only had one model or 2 models, right? So you have like a half dozen models working in combination with one another, much more brain-like. The other part is that it's highly trained and tuned by humans, and so it's a lot more relevant to the world of humans. I would add the last piece is that increasingly these models are being integrated with knowledge graphs. So the more they're doing that, the more relevant the output is to our world, right? Diffusion models are even more sophisticated. So diffusion models are the models behind image and video generation. So as you can see, this is highly complex. Basically, the innovation of diffusion models over what was considered state of the art generative visual models 5 or 6 years ago is the fact that to generate new images based on a training set of old images, you need to insert some noise in your model, right? Otherwise, it's going to look like the training set too much, right? And older models used to apply this noise to the entire image, and so those new diffusion models are able to apply noise to different parts of the image, which is why a big part of why diffusion models allow the user to specifically set instructions for like background and clothes and hairstyle and things like that, right? So this is one of the few areas where diffusion models are a huge innovation on previous image generation models. Is they're a lot more granular, right? And the ability to tune the noise to different parts of the image is also a huge innovation, right? It's not just throwing some noise; it's got to be the right level of noise. So enormous amount of tuning. The diffusion models also have large language models and transformers integrated in them to be able to prompt the image properly and stuff like that. So again, the takeaway from this is these models are incredibly sophisticated. They are out of reach for most organizations, right? So, OpenAI spent hundreds of millions of dollars developing GPT-4 and ChatGPT, right? This is really not something that everybody can afford. And the same thing, right? Diffusion models are incredibly complex and difficult to train and tune and build, and they involve a lot of computation. So why are these new models important? Right? So here it's specifically about ChatGPT. Again, really interesting now to see emerging these hybrid models made of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different models working in combination with one another. This is very new. It didn't used to happen very much 5 or 6 years ago. The field of machine learning and AI has evolved tremendously in the past 5 or 6 years, in the sense that we've learned, like where we have these sort of disparate different models, we've learned how to integrate all these models together, which is something the human brain does. But so the architecture of these models is a lot more brain-like compared to where the field was like 5 or 6 years ago. They're important because they're great at a few things, right? One of the things that I think is the most impressive about ChatGPT is its ability to generate code and debug code. Right? It's not able to, again, in the same manner that ChatGPT is not able to write a script which involves some very, very high level symbolic reasoning. It is not able to do output super sophisticated code, but it can automate a lot of, just in the same way that it can automate a lot of the communication that we do that is sort of very mundane. It can automate a lot of code writing that is very mundane, and it can also debug a lot of code that's very mundane. And that's it's a huge deal for a lot of developers. And it's also is going to get better. As these models get integrated with knowledge graphs, as these models as people work towards productizing these models into applications that need to be very, very relevant for our world, they need to create a lot of value for our world, they're going to get a lot better. It's not clear how much better they're going to get, considering that all of this is still super fancy deep learning. There is no dramatic methodological change beyond the fact that it's different kinds of neural networks integrated with one another, with knowledge graphs, with a few other, with human tuning and stuff like that. But it's still deep learning, right? So it's going to get a lot better. It's not really clear how much better it's going to get. So 5 places where organizations can develop competitive advantage in AI. Own the data, right? If you own the data, you own the foundation for training models. Own the intelligence, meaning you own the models themselves, right? This is what OpenAI does with ChatGPT. They're owning that model, but I'm really sure what is underneath the hood. Another really interesting area where organizations can develop a competitive advantage in AI is master the productization and the scale. So all these models are extremely computationally hungry. They're very greedy. They're enormously expensive to run. It's actually not really clear to me how OpenAI or Stability AI or Midjourney can make money allowing millions of people to use their service for very little money. Because in reality, anytime you prompt ChatGPT or Midjourney, it costs Midjourney and OpenAI a lot of money in computation, right? So those models are very computational hungry. Whoever can make them lighter, less expensive, and even able to run at the edge really is going to create enormously valuable IP, because it's not just important to have these models be extremely intelligent, they also have to be really, really light. I'll remind you that the human brain can develop very, very deep intelligence with very little actual computation. The 2 last pieces are really important, and they're I think, very overlooked. One is own the interface. The ability to create user interfaces that can essentially connect the model to the human need and the use case is really, really important. It's very tricky. It's very, very difficult. And in my mind, UX design is one of the hottest areas of AI. The second one, in which we looked at the beginning, is master culture. Whichever organization can the quickest ramp up their employees on what AI is, how data is, how to think about it, how to talk about it, how to use it, right? How to upskill people in helping them understand how to work in an AI-driven future and a data-driven future. That is, in my mind, the most important part of artificial intelligence today, right? So if you're thinking about what is the first place where we can work to help our organization move forward in our AI journey, the very first thing to do is education. Educate your employees. Too often, when I talk to organizations, not just in the media industry, you have people who are either sort of over pessimistic about it or over optimistic about it. People don't understand AI and machine learning enough. So this is really, really important. Now, here's the 5 places where media organizations can develop competitive advantage in AI. So a lot of media organizations own the data, right? So content is data. Audience, streamers have a lot of audience data. Your marketing data is also very, very valuable. One of the ways, for example, the studios can really exist in an AI future is by leveraging their enormous data sets. Their libraries are data, their knowledge, their institutional knowledge of the audience is data. So there's just a lot of places in media organizations that are very rich in data that can be used to train very, very powerful models. On the intelligence, it's not clear to me how media organizations can support the kind of AI organization to be able to develop models that are, enormously expensive and sophisticated, like ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion. Similarly, mastering productization, and scale, it requires a very, very strong software culture. I know there are a lot of organizations and media organizations in particular that have a lot of interest in making their models lighter and running on smaller computation. But it also is kind of a heavy lift from a software development perspective. The two last areas I feel media organizations are uniquely positioned to play a really big role and develop competitive advantage in the AI world. Master the user interface. I think media organizations, by definition, are focused on developing and designing interfaces that are that resonate with audiences, right? And in the terms of culture, I think that we see that a lot. Media organizations have a very important, very unique view of AI, where that is a lot more focused on the human, right? And we are very adamant at ETC in developing and helping the media industry, develop its own voice on AI, because we think that the way they view artificial intelligence, the way the media industry views artificial intelligence, is a lot closer to what society views artificial intelligence. I think the tech industry is obviously over optimistic, over enthusiastic, overly too quick to ignore the societal impact. I think the media industry, being an industry that is rooted in its knowledge of what people want and the stories and the humanity behind the stories, is a lot more capable of putting that technology in the correct societal context. We have a question.
This is sort of a. I think they're asking you for your opinion or speculation, but Tammy asks, which jobs in the media space will AI be able to replace, and which jobs will AI not be able to replace?
That's a great question, and I am going to get there.
Oh, good.
In a couple slides. No, it is massively important. It's not really clear, but we have some thoughts, and I'm looking forward to share them with you. One of the things I wanted to mention is that from a market perspective and a technology perspective, generative AI does not solve the main problem of the media industry. The main problem of the media industry is what content to make for what audiences, right? And as a matter of fact, it makes it a lot worse, right? If you think about the fact that the demand for entertainment is stable and will always be stable due to the fact that there's never going to be more than 24 hours in a day, the supply of entertainment has exploded in the past 20 years. And generative AI is about to put serious production tools into the hands of everybody, right? So the competition for people's attention and eyeballs and time is going to get a lot worse. One of the ways that the media industry can develop some serious competitive advantage is to be able to develop the tools to curate all that content, to be the ones, since they have all this audience intelligence, especially the streamers, right? Since you have so much audience intelligence, you can develop models into what that audience wants to see. And that's really, really powerful. That is not something that Stability AI can do, or Google or Microsoft, right? So the media industry really has a role to play in curating what used to be oceans of content. It's about to become galaxies of content. Where will disruption happen most? We don't see a lot of disruption happening in the development process. This is still a very intuitive, very human-driven process. It is getting there a little bit, but not massively. It is extremely disruptive in the pre-production process. We've talked to many, many directors and producers and writers who have been using generative AI to put together extremely slick previs materials, lookbooks, storyboards, and so on and so forth, right? So the way projects are going to get pitched is about to get really, really good. In production, we're seeing a lot of interest in neural radiance fields. And neural radiance fields, if you don't know what it is, basically it is a machine learning driven photogrammetric tool that can take a 2D image and really turn it into a 3D visualization. It's so in terms of being able to be used in production, but it's getting really much better very fast, and it is going to be very disruptive in the production phase. Obviously, generative AI massively disruptive. Well, fairly massively disruptive in post production. Lots of workflows are going to get automated. Marketing and distribution, already are using some aspects of machine learning, and generative AI doesn't really have a place there except for SEO. Now, where media organizations can develop a lot of unique capabilities, I think in the development phase, I think media organizations can use AI machine learning to be the ones to own that knowledge about what the audience wants, what the audience needs to see. That's really, really important. It's always been, professional storytellers and media organizations have the most inherent knowledge and the most inherent data about what people want. And that's really going to be critical moving forward as we see an explosion of high production value content. In production, obviously, media organizations can develop their own highly integrated workflows using AI machine learning, virtual production, cloud computing. Really, all of that is moving really, really fast. And a lot of organizations are already developing their own IP. In post-production, I think a lot of post-production houses and VFX houses are going to develop a lot of IP. It's not really clear if the studios are going to do that. Obviously, marketing and distribution and IP franchise management, media organizations, can own the audience, can own the data, and can own the data about the audience, and can own the relationship with the audience. So, all right, looking at who's going to do what in job displacement. So we're seeing different levels of disruption and different opportunities to develop core competencies at different parts of the industry. Definitely a lot happening in the software vendors, right? The Avas of the world, the Deluxes of the world, even engines like Unreal Engine, Unity are really just ramping up on generative AI, and really, Adobe put out Firefly, right? All of this is going to happen really fast. We have another question. Go ahead.
The question is from Martin. Hello, Martin. And the question is, he says, great information presentation. We see a lot of speech-to-text AI applications, but we're interested in real-time simultaneous interpretation, audio, with auto language detection to replace live interpreters. Everything we've seen so far on the audio side has considerable lag and no auto language detection. Do you see more advancements in this field in the very near future?
Oh, 100%. Yes. I think this is one of the areas that is going to get really, really good, really, really fast. A lot of localization is going to get automated and optimized. And I think if we're talking about who is going to be affected by generative AI models, I think localization is going to be one of the top areas, and sooner rather than later. In terms of who is going to get disrupt it and replace. It's not super clear yet, right? I actually don't think there is going to be much job displacement in the near future. And the reason is, you know, there's a lot of hype around those models. There's a lot of experimentation and tinkering, and those are extremely sophisticated, and their capabilities are really, really impressive. Most of them are not production quality yet. Most of them are not um, good enough to meet the high bar of the kind of content production that happens in the media industry, right? So I think what we're going to see first is and this is kind of where it relates to this slide, right? We're going to see a lot of disruption of micro workflows in, Avid and Adobe and all these tools, right? We're going to see, sliders that become buttons and things like that. Just a little bit of automation. We're going to see, you know, big production houses using these tools to create more integrated workflows, right, and bring their costs down. Um, uh, Obviously, as I mentioned, right, all the localization stuff, the translation stuff, is going to be highly automated. But beyond that, um, you know, it's not clear to me how these models can significantly disrupt the field. I think it's a really, really good idea to learn about artificial intelligence, to use all these models and be intimately familiar with them. But in terms of job displacement, um, obviously there's no future in which artificial intelligence does not destroy some jobs. But I think it's too early to tell what's going to happen. And I actually am not one of the people who thinks that, we're going to see a lot of blood in the streets with that kind of stuff. I think a lot of these models are impressive enough to be really good party tricks. They're definitely not impressive enough to be used in production and post production yet. It will get better. It's not clear how, and it's not clear when. So I think if I were people who are working in industry, technical people, I would definitely pay very close attention to all the tools that are coming out there, all the methodologies that are coming out there, really play with them, become intimately familiar with them, become an expert in ChatGPT, become an expert in Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, and just keep using them and gain knowledge of their capabilities, and then use them in your own workflows, right? If you have to. I think that's really interesting. I do think that technical executives or technical people in the media industry who have deep knowledge of these tools will definitely have a leg up over people who don't. You don't need to become an AI expert. You don't need to go back to school and learn about machine learning and computer science. But I think being a power user of ChatGPT or Midjourney is going to become a really big deal in the future. I think we have 6 minutes left. I think I just want to sort of opening up for questions. I will say to wrap it up that different players in the industry will have different approaches and will play with different models. I think the big studios really, by and large, do not have an incentive to develop their own generative AI models. They can use the ones that are already off the shelf. I think they have their own incentive to integrate these models in their workflows and create, optimized workflows from development to distribution, right? That stuff is extremely important. That stuff can make content creation more automated, optimized, and cheaper, which everybody wants to do. Um, but I think most of the innovation and the disruption will happen outside of the industry, will have an impact on the industry, but will happen outside of the industry, except for the ability of content creators, and especially the ones that own that audience relationship, to leverage their audience data to know audiences better and develop these curation tools, these very powerful AI driven curation tools that are going to be critical for media creators because they need to know what to make to show to what's going to resonate with people. And remember, this is something that Hollywood's been doing for over 100 years now. And at the same time, those curation tools are very useful for audiences because we as audience members are bombarded with content, and the more content is put in the pipeline, the more difficult it is for us to decide where to turn our attention. So I think beyond generative AI, which is really cool and disruptive, I think the most disruptive area of AI moving forward is still understand the audience better than your competitors and manage this relationship with your audience better than your competitors. That is the most important part of artificial intelligence moving forward. It is also the part, selfishly, that we're working on at ETC and my startup Cordo. We're building very powerful tools to enable that in the media industry. So get in touch if you have some more specific questions.
Okay, thank you, Eve. It's an amazing set of technologies. I guess it's a set of different technologies, going by the complexity of the diagram, especially for the visual generation of content.
Different models working together to create something, which is how the brain works, right?
Right. Martin has a follow-up comment from his question previously. He says, when talking about generative AI, closed captions come to mind. He says, we're already playing with AI closed captions, and it's very accurate. And he is testing, his company is testing it on the live to air programming.
Very powerful. Again, all of the closed captioning translation is going to get heavily disrupted. Yeah.
We do have a question. I'm going to ask it. It's from Aaron, and want to make it is a question about government policy. He asks, do you think government policy will have a part to play if AI tools are too disruptive for the job market?
Oh, 100%. As a matter of fact, I think we're in the golden age of AI. I think the future will get a lot more difficult for people creating AI models. I think the EU is going to come out this year with very broad sweeping legislation on artificial intelligence. And as we know from GDPR, once the EU speaks, right, the world has to get in line because, organizations like the studios are global organizations, so they have to comply with EU laws. And frankly, people hate that stuff. There's a lot more people that think AI is creepy and disruptive and don't want it than people who do, right? And so you have to be really careful because, the sort of the technorati is very vocal, but it's just a minority of people who are really, really excited about AI and who are making money from it. And there's a lot of hype, and there's actually a lot of greed and maybe even a little bit of fraud out there. Right? People who are making these grand claims about AI capabilities. By and large, the majority of people hate that stuff, and so that's going to be reflected in the legislation. And I think 2024 will be the first campaign where not only generative AI is used, but like AI is a really, really big piece of the debate. And I think we're going to see just an enormous amount of clamping down on this from a legal standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, from a policy standpoint, from an ethical standpoint. Everyone's coming out at this. Right. Huge impact.
Because SMPTE is a 501c3, I do want to remind our viewers that views and opinions expressed during the webcast are not necessarily those of SMPTE or SMPTE members. I'm just doing that. I felt I needed to remind folks.
You're making me a little nervous right now.
No. You don't need to be nervous. Let's see. Is there value that can confirm and verify the authenticity of content, data, and information overall?
Yes. So content authentication is going to get huge. And we are, all the watermarking technology, all this stuff is going to get really, really important. It is going to be an enormous area of interest for us at ETC and for the industry as a whole moving forward. There's a bunch of technologies that have been used to do that, that have been developed to do that. There's a bunch of models that exist out there. So we're currently sifting through all of them and trying to understand them better, so we can go back to the community and say, hey, this is what's happening, this is what's coming, and this is where we need to go.
Great. Zandra wants to know what books are you currently enjoying regarding AI?
God, I'm right now. I have an interest in agent-based modeling, which is an area of AI that no one really uses enough, and I think that's one of the biggest areas of AI moving forward. So I'm in the middle of this book called Complex Adaptive Systems, that I have right here. I've recently picked up this one, which is really, really good, which I highly, highly recommend for people. The Myth of Artificial Intelligence. As we're getting bombarded by hype on AI, it's really useful to take a step back and develop the tools and the knowledge to kind of parse out the arguments between, the super hyperbolic stuff and the stuff that is probably closer to reality. I would say, if you're thinking about, if you're reading something about artificial intelligence, think about who is talking. And you have two classes of commentators. You have the people who are um, uh, beholden to their audience, right? Their goal is to grow their audience, and those tend to create incentives to go into hyperbole. And you have people who are practitioners, who are beholding to their code, who are building stuff, right? People like me, who know that it's blood, sweat, and tears, that it's very, very difficult, that sort of, this whole notion that AI is going to be controlling the world is like, no. It's just, that stuff is really hard. Like, those AI applications are extremely dumb, and it's just, we're not there yet. It could be theoretically a problem, 10 or 20 years down the road, but all the stuff that, if people are talking about it like it's magic, they're wrong. It's not magic. It's blood, sweat, and gold. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. It's sometimes billions of dollars invested to produce applications that are cool, powerful at certain things, but really bad at most of everything.
Okay, that's an interesting note. I think this is our last question, if that's okay. An anonymous attendee asks, are there any particular programming languages that are more adept for building models? And if so, which ones?
I mean, Python. I mean, most of this stuff is written in Python. Or applications that where latency and speed is an issue are in C and C++, because they're sort of lower level languages. So all the stuff in finance, for example, is in C++. The A lot of the stuff in self-driving cars is in C++, again, because of the need to, for speed. But I would say Python is the king and queen of languages.
Perfect. Thank you, Eve. Very interesting.
Thank you.
You drew quite a crowd, and I think you covered the topic in quite a bit of depth. I'm sure most everybody understood some of it. And no, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I hope I did better than that.
They're all very, very smart, very intelligent people, and I'll bet the majority of our audience is involved with it in some form or another.
Thank you.
SIMT, when I was on SIMT staff, I used to have an interpreter for what I was trying to say versus what I actually came out of my mouth. So it was a good thing. I think you covered the topic well.
Thank you. And I would say, don't forget about the Synthetic Media Summit, June 8th. Be on the lookout for an email coming out of SIMT with a RSVP link. It's going to be one day of incredible talks. All the world's leaders in this field are going to share what they think about it. Legal, technical, use cases, the whole nine. We have an incredible lineup. So be on the lookout for that, and get in touch with me if you have any questions.
Sounds like an amazing event. Thank you. So I do have a little bit of housekeeping that I do need to do. And I do want to remind folks about the learning assessment that SIMTI wants to do. They want to ensure that we are covering the topics and the technologies that are of most importance to you. So you can either scan that code quick, get your phone, and it will bring you to a 3-question survey. And it's very important to the future track that SIMTI education will take. And I also want to thank our guests for being with us today. Again, many places you can put your attention, both educationally, professionally, etc. So we do appreciate you spending a few minutes with us today, and hope that you did find it valuable and worthwhile time spent with us. And I'd like to close on a personal note. Please cherish the moments you have with your friends, family, and loved ones. With that, take care. If you're traveling, safe travels. And we'll see you next time on a SIMTI educational webcast.